Hi, Thomas Abraham James here, CEO and President of Pulsar Helium Inc., soon to be listed on the TSXV in Canada. And as the name suggests, we're a helium exploration company with projects in Minnesota and Greenland.
Thomas, thank you very much for the introduction. Good to see you again. It almost feels like first full circle, because the first time I saw you, you were working on a helium project. Tell me why you've come back to helium and what the story is, please. You know, your involvement.
Yes, certainly. So yes, what was it? First started in helium. It's about a decade ago now, and you're right. I couldn't let it go. So after leaving a previous company, Helium One Global, so since then, my interest in helium has never waned. But certainly aware of other opportunities around the world with potential for primary helium. And I mentioned primary, it's quite important because that is where helium is the primary economic driver, where it's not a byproduct of hydrocarbon production. And there's not too many places in the world that you can look, but with our projects in Minnesota in the US, and then with Greenland in Greenland, with the Greenland project, that was one that generated in-house. So I worked in Greenland quite extensively, as the artwork behind me suggests. And then with Minnesota, there was an introduction that was made to us for I guess you could say a discovery by accident, which turns out to be one of the highest grade drilled helium occurrences in the world. So really, with these two fantastic opportunities, Pulsar Helium was born and is now my full attention.
And you mentioned that you're coming to market. Where are you in that process?
Okay, so what happened was last week we received, we lodged our final prospectus. We're doing an initial public offering on the TSXV, and so we lodged our final prospectus, and then we received the receipts for that. So that was a major milestone for us. And so now what's targeting and what appears will be happening is that next week on Tuesday, the 15th of August, is when we would then be doing the final stage of getting the company registered and listed on the TSXV. That is when the final approval occurs from the exchange. And then once listed, the process in Canada is then you go into an immediate trading halt, which lasts for roughly 48 hours. That gives everybody the opportunity to onboard the company into all the various systems, with live trading then commencing on Thursday, the 17th of August.
And what's the pre-money valuation of the company, and how much are you raising?
Okay, so the money that we went out, the pre-money valuation, so everything I mentioned is Canadian dollars, so it was 19 million, and we've raised just over 3 million, so it's 3.1 million Canadian, so that financing round is closed. So yes, now 22 million valuation, 3 in the bank, and we're under the ticker PLSR, Pulsar, so yes, that financing we closed the other week.
And it must have been, all financings at the moment are tough. I mean, I saw in your prospectus that you were going for between 3 and 6. It's just a really, 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 really tough market. Did you have to hunt far and wide for that, or were you able to find a few kind of deep-pocketed individuals that were behind helium?
Look, it's undoubtedly. I think we probably chose the most difficult time, but then again, with all my other previous ventures, it's always been the same. So I don't think there's ever an easy time. But with this particular one, we have a following. So when I say we, so the company, so our chairman Neil Herbert, technical manager Josh Blewett, our other directors. So look, I think people have benefited from our successes in the past. So we've got a very loyal following, which we're very grateful for. Also, ourselves as the directors and management, we also participated quite heavily in this round as well. We did get over the minimum amount, and indeed, as you say, there was a maximum figure which we didn't achieve. But really, it wasn't through I guess, not lack of interest, but with us getting into the Canadian market, so this is something that's quite new for us to get into Canada. It's also the IPO financing is only open to those who do have a Canadian broker as well. So that is limiting in itself. So the pool of people that we can go to for finance is smaller because of that. But certainly, once we're listed in Canada, I personally and my colleagues will be spending an awful lot of time over there. And really, the Canadian market is something which is relatively untapped at this stage, and something that we'll be working with vigor to change and to make sure that the company is well known over there.
Why Canada? Why not London? I mean, Neil's British. You're based in kind of the London time zones. Greenland's in London time zones. You know, why Canada?
Canada, because of the geography of the assets. That's one reason. So our major project is in Minnesota, and then our other one in Greenland. So the geographic relevance and I guess appreciation that comes with that. The other thing is that there are quite a few Canadian explorers and producers listed on the TSXV also. We like that, the number of comparisons that can be made there. So those are the two major reasons. Obviously, our major knowledge is in London and in Australia, but there are not so many helium companies. So one which is close to my heart is in London, which is Helium One, but there are no others in London at this moment in time. In Australia, you do have a few as well, but geographically very separated from where our assets are. And we will be spending most of our time in North America.
Good. Tell me about the work program. You've raised 3.1 million Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
How long is that going to last, and how much of that is going to go into the ground?
Yeah, sure. So that's we've got a budget which is there in the prospectus, which is to go for 12 months, and that includes the major milestone for us, which is drilling. So this is our project in Minnesota, which is called the Topaz project. So that one has already been drilled. There's a discovery that's made there, and it flowed 10.5% helium, making it one of the world's most high-grade occurrences. So we're drilling an appraisal well in the fourth quarter of this year. So we're at an advanced stage for that one. And really the reason for doing that, so it's going to be effectively a twin of the existing discovery hole, but the discovery was made by chance. So they were conducting mineral exploration, looking for nickel. So you can appreciate that it didn't have all the tooling on it that you would anticipate for a gas show. So really the objective is to go out, do the appraisal well, twin that, with any luck, repeat the results of the initial discovery, and then look at, based on a success case scenario, then look at a resource update, feasibility studies, and really see what we can do to fast track that to realize its potential and hopeful production. In addition to that, so in the build up to the drilling, we've got a seismic survey. That one it's quite an innovative technique. So rather than your conventional seismic, which is thumper trucks or blasting, we're using these nodes. So it's passive seismic. We've already done a desktop study with the company which leases these nodes, and the depth penetration is good for our purposes. So it gets down to about 700 meters depth for a good resolution of data. The helium discovery for us was at 540 meters depth. So we'll do that one as well for additional level of de-risking. But that will also benefit once we drill, and should we repeat the result, then having that seismic data will then also help us to constrain any future resource calculations as well. So those are the major work programs we've got in the next few months.
And if the discovery hole was not drilled with kind of gas equipment, which is kind of a conventional wireline diamond, A, how did they measure the flow rate, and B, surely it's been a leaking. Could there not have been a kind of a helium escape through that void from surface?
We're looking at there's certainly the potential for it, but luckily there was a very diligent crew that was there at the time. In fact, we've employed a couple of them to work for us who were present at the discovery at the time, and one who introduced us to it as well. So what occurred was the gas appeared to be under quite significant pressure. So there was a 3-meter core barrel in there, and it was 90% loaded with core. That was shot out a bit like a projectile. So we've got a good feel for, the well, you could do a calculation based on the diameter of the pipe, the weight of the coal barrel that was ejected. It was then open for 4 days with no obvious loss in pressure. There was then, I guess they didn't have the right sort of testing for the equipment for the flow rates, but they did use a wind meter and anemometer, and the the gas tore that to shreds. So it maxed out at 150 kilometers an hour, which is the capability of the instrument, and then got destroyed. So we know there's minimum the velocity is 150 kilometers an hour. And then gas samples were taken. So a number of samples were taken. Some were sent to an accredited laboratory. Then the other one went off to the University of Toronto. And those ones, there was some corrections made for atmospheric contamination. But both sets of results were then in extremely good sort of correlation with one another, and that 10.5% helium. After that, their initial concern was that you can imagine at the time hitting gas and not really anticipating that, they were concerned that it was combustible and that the rig was going to explode. The analysis showed them that it was not combustible, and so then what they did was that they were then able to go in and to cement off that hole. So it has been fully blocked. So I think that the chances of any leakage are minimal. In fact, when we've been looking at some satellite data as well, and you see that there are some helium anomalies in the vicinity, but nothing that suggests that it is gushing out of the ground. So strong level of confidence they did a good job of sealing it off.
And what's the conventional? I understand you're in kind of it's in Archean Shield. You're in a very old part of the crust. What's the gas hosted in? Is it in a kind of a conventional oil and gas kind of interstitial porosity reservoir, or is it in something else?
It's where the discovery was. It was a void. So it was literally nothing. What we have there is the Anamiki Basin, which is a sedimentary basin. To the north of that, you have the Giants Range batholith, which is a very old granitic intrusion there, and that is deemed to be the source rock. So it's very well endowed in uranium and thorium. As that decays, creates an alpha particle, which is helium. So we've got that. And then you have the Duluth complex, which is an intrusive body which has come in, and it appears to have sealed off over the top of the Anamiki Basin, or a portion thereof. So what it is, and we can't answer this conclusively until this drill hole is completed, but what it appears is that the source is that batholith to the north, that you've then got a reservoir there, a void, possibly then underneath it in the basin you've got something more conventional, as you said, suggests something like a sandstone reservoir. But the sealing unit on top is this igneous intrusion, and I think this is why that we haven't seen anybody. We're the first mover in this location, and there's no obvious surface emanations of the helium. In other places that I've worked, you see thermal springs, and you can sample the gases from those, or you've got a very sort of thick density of drill holes for hydrocarbon exploration that we don't have. And so I think this one drill hole that hit it by chance, otherwise it's a blind occurrence. So we've got a very good feel with that igneous sealing unit that the seal integrity is very good, and I think that's justified by the pressure which the gas came out of that initial discovery. But with this drill hole that we're doing, the appraisal well, drilling deeper so that we can answer these questions conclusively, what really is down there. And it's very exciting.
What will be the time gap between the completing the seismic survey and the drilling of the well? I mean, as in, will you have a time to incorporate your findings from the seismic, or is it just you're just going to do the twin hole and that's kind of decided already, and then you'll look at the data from the seismic and the twin hole and then recalibrate?
I think it's probably unlikely that the seismic will change the location of this appraisal well. Drilling right next to the known discovery. So what we've got at the moment is looking at 20 meters-ish away from the discovery well and drilling down there. The seismic, unless we see something that's quite obvious there, then obviously we would adjust accordingly. but that's not really the intention. It's really to then, well, if there's something obvious, to let us know. So that's one thing. But the other one is that the major reason is that seismic post drilling and post hopeful success, then that will help us to model up the reservoir better. So that's more the intention. But to answer the initial component of your question, the gap between the two, that seismic survey, we'd be leaving the nodes in the field for roughly about 4 weeks, and so that's set to start later this month. So we'll have probably a good sort of few weeks there between the completion of the survey before the mobilization of the rig.
And you mentioned mobilizing the rig in Q4. Target depth 500 meters. Presumably, this is a wider bore kind of a oil and gas style drilling machine. What's the timeline to completion and then testing, and what's your expectation on kind of getting results at the back end of that process?
Yeah, sure. We anticipate that the time to drill, and we'll be pushing down a bit deeper than that 540-meter discovery depth. But we anticipate, the drill conditions are known. As I say, it's very competent igneous rock, so that certainly assists. But we anticipate roughly about 3 weeks for that to be completed. To then get the initial gas results, that will be fairly shortly thereafter. With any luck, we'll be able to get some real-time analysis and then taking off additional samples off to a commercial laboratory. And then the testing equipment coming in, results from that, I'd probably say roughly another 3 weeks after that. So you're looking at perhaps from commencement of the well to getting all the results, roughly 6 weeks.
And you mentioned drilling through igneous rock. Does that mean you're drilling through the Duluth complex, and then your target is essentially at the bottom of the Duluth complex into the sediments?
That's what it appears to be, yes. That's what the data suggests. So we don't have concrete data that beneath that are the sediments, but we certainly would be drilling through the Duluth complex, a rock type called troctolite, and then under that, underneath that into the void, and then after that, let's see. But certainly with the regional geology of the area, we know that the Anamiki Basin is nearby. It's also interesting to note too that this is within the mid-continent rift of the US as well. So if you look at, say, going back to my old stomping ground, East Africa, so you had the helium there associated with that, the rifting there of East African Rift. Whereas, interestingly, where we are in Minnesota, it's a similar geological setting, but much older. I guess with that, older basin and a very stable geological environment now.
And what's the relevance of a rift? Is that just because there's a higher geothermal gradient, or is it because there's a kind of in batholith component which comes closer to surface? I mean, why do you mention the rift?
The rift is important. So there's a few key ingredients that you're looking for commercial helium projects. So one is your source. So for that, you want a really old granite, ideally, so that's very well endowed in uranium and thorium, which ultimately breaks down to create the helium. The other thing is that you could then appreciate you've got a crystalline rock, and inside that, you've got these little gaseous components of helium. So you need a liberation mechanism. And so the rift there, wonderful. So that certainly helps for that gas to escape. Then the other thing you need is a trapping unit or a seal. So that's where your sedimentary basin comes in. Or in this instance, you've then got a sealing off intrusion, which has come in. And then the fourth ingredient, which is one to really further drive that gas, that helium, out of the crystalline rock, is a heat source. But it's a Goldilocks zone. You don't want that heat source to be too close, because with that would come large amounts of CO2. Whereas if the heat source is too far away, then you wouldn't have that thermal drive either. So those are the four components that you really look for a high concentration helium occurrence. And then on top of that, you really hope that there is no potential for hydrocarbon generation either. So, and certainly, I think the oil and gas history of Minnesota can be summed up in a sentence, which is, don't go there. So that hydrocarbon concern isn't really there. But another thing which gives me a great deal of comfort is that There are a number of other drill holes in the vicinity, and so these ones were not targeting gas. They were more geared towards either geotechnical or they were for mineral exploration. And there were quite a few instances where non-flammable gas was encountered, and then only one of them that we can see was analyzed for helium, and that was about 160 kilometers away to the southwest, which is interestingly further away from the source rock, that batholith I mentioned. But that hole was analyzed for helium and came back with 2% helium. So we don't think that we're looking at an isolated occurrence. We think we're actually looking at quite a large system here.
I hesitate to use the word binary, but your first drill hole has an element of that, doesn't it?
I guess you could say that. I mean, I guess that with it's been drilled. That one we have our CPR from Sproule, so it's certainly been reviewed, and it's very much been a known discovery. So I take comfort in that. We also have some existing geophysical data, so that gives us some comfort too, magnetics, gravity data. We'll have the seismic data before we drill as well. So, it's certainly by no means a wildcat. So it's not an exploration hole either. So it is an appraisal well of a known discovery. So there is that. But in terms of being binary, I think that with those other occurrences of helium in the vicinity, with our license package, so we have the license which covers where that discovery area is. We then have an exclusive option for further ground around that. And the company is then also, we've got in applications for larger ground in the vicinity as well. So really with that first mover opportunity that we have, we're taking full advantage of that. With the other gas shows that are there, knowing the geology, I like to think that it is not binary. Obviously, of course, we wish this hole every success, but we really do think that we are looking at a much larger system.
Yeah, good. Before we go, tell me about the helium opportunity in Greenland and how much emphasis and how much work are you doing on that? Is that just a holding position?
Not a holding position. So that one was really it was a discovery that was only made last year. So as I say, in-house. So with that one there, right geological ingredients once again. So the four that I mentioned earlier, and some of the oldest rocks on the planet. So great potential. There are some thermal springs there, so we went off to those last year, and we managed to get to two of them. There are a number of others that we want to get to, and we aim to get there this year. But with those two, we found that they are nitrogen-helium systems. So we got the highest result that we got was 0.8% helium. So not quite the same level as we have in Topaz, but certainly the chemistry is what you want to see. And then the other thing that we found is that in discussion with a group in Iceland is that there's also very much a geothermal potential there as well. So we're actually looking at a combined primary helium plus the potential for geothermal. Having worked in Greenland for quite some time, certainly know that infrastructure is something that needs to tackle quite early on. So it's very pleasing to see that geothermal potential is available right near to the helium area. The other thing is that helium has just been placed on the European Commission list of critical raw materials. The EU imports 95% of its helium from outside the EU. So with that change in legislation there, putting it on the critical list, there is a very genuine appetite, certainly also with things like the Europeans and just like the US, which is their safeguarding the manufacturing of computer chips and therefore semiconductors. To fabricate a semiconductor, you must have liquid helium. If the EU is completely reliant on imports, that's not ideal. So for our project in Greenland, certainly it's one that will be pushing forward. But in the short term, just because of that high concentration and it's already being drilled, I think for those obvious reasons that Minnesota is getting the short-term treatment to get that one moving as quickly as possible. Because really, we twin that hole, and then with any luck, all goes well, we'll then be pivoting very much to see how quickly we could get production there.
Yeah, Good. Tom, Thomas, thank you very much for the oversight, the overview of the project. Good luck with the listing process, and really, it's kind of all eyes on the seismic, and then of course the appraisal well in Q4.
Yes, no, it's going to be a very, very exciting time, and so yes, listing next week, all going well, and no, couldn't be happier. So it's been one big process, but it's well worth it.